Welcome to the second talk. What DAOs do, what DAOs don't do, but they need to do. Sorry, there it is. Now it's up. Cool. Let's start off. We just talked a little bit about what DAOs are, but let's kick things off. Just any points that weren't covered, just to make sure that like everybody's pretty clear what a DAO is before we jump into what they do well and what they don't do.
Sounds good. Can we do a little introduction as to each individual too? Okay. So I unfortunately did not put my Twitter handle there, but it's at Acorn Market, spelled with a K, A-K-O-R-N Market. And I'm a founder of a regenerative NFT marketplace that's trying to get more funding channeled towards tree planting and other climate actions.
Hey, everybody, good morning. I'm Shawn from Equa. We're a platform for startups and investor capital, VCs and investors, but kind of right on the cusp between what you'd find in a traditional one with Carta to something right down the angle of DAOs. And previously, you might know me from creating a company called Salt Lending, which was really a crypto lending backed company as well. Really excited to be chatting with everybody.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Lisa Wocken. I am a researcher and core team member at talentDAO. We do data science to research the DAO ecosystem. And I'm also a founder of a Web2 e-commerce business called Bolster Leadership, which focuses on kind of taking out the middleman of leadership development and trying to provide high-quality leadership development to any person in any organization.
Awesome. Yeah, I definitely should have started with intros. Sorry, guys, was getting a little settled. My name's Ben Lakoff, co-founder, business lead of Charge Particles, so NFT protocol that allows you to take your NFT and put things inside of it. So very much along our march of progressive decentralization. So back to the start here. Let's start off with definitions, a little bit more about like what exactly is a DAO.
I mean, the last presentation was really good and defined it well. I think the big key is that it's very hard to put in a couple words because it can be so many different things. The way I look at it is the target goal being organizing with frictionless organization. How do we organize without any friction across borders? And of course, there's a whole bunch more to that.
So I actually have kind of a canned response here because I recently wrote a Mirror article on what is a DAO, where I did a literature review on 12 different highly credible definitions. So if you're interested in that, I can share it. But basically, I say that a DAO, based on these definitions across the ecosystem, is a blockchain-enabled organization with shared purpose, community, and capital. And so that's my response.
And I think one thing that we hear often in this space is it's leaderless, but something that we need to understand is that when we organize as humans, there's leaders that emerge within that organization, and we want to be able to enable leadership within many aspects of every DAO community.
Sure. Great ones there, guys. All right, so a lot of what we're going to kind of talk about is DAO being a contributor to DAOs and kind of what are the pros and cons of that. So let's start off just by talking about the landscape of DAO employment, of contributors to these different DAOs. What's the current state? What does it look like right now?
I think we have to think about how people are able to find DAOs first. What are the directory services available that say, this is our DAO, and get people interested? Primary communication channels right now are Discord, Twitter. Twitter being the more public space for people to find out about DAOs. Happy to hear other thoughts as to how do you find a DAO?
I mean, I agree with you. That and YouTube, probably we're all hearing about it, and most of the time it's because of price or people getting excited about something. It's still early when we're talking about things being in V1, V2. But I personally am just now at the point where we're hiring in that space, so I can't speak to the hiring. I need a lot of advice there, looking for as many tools as possible. It seems to me like if they form around finance and economics, just like most organizations do in mission. And the rub where we've got a lot of work to do is all around delegation and team leading and roles, more specifically, rather than just proposals and voting. So that's most of the stuff I'm following. Still early phase.
Yeah, I think even personally, I got first involved in crypto by having a helium antenna onto my roof. And so I think there's lots of different ways that people are finding DAOs, not really one path. And yet that's some of the work that talentDAO is venturing to do, is to try to get some career pathing actually researched and done in the coming year. Because I think it is one of those spaces that I think people in this room, this will resonate. We have far more questions than do we have answers. Even just by the number of conversations I've had with people talking about how they are cropping up DAO onboarding. There's areas that we can be collaborating and working together in order to reduce redundancies and provide clarity to our communities. And I think everybody has that intention. And so how do we coordinate in a way that makes it efficient?
Yeah, and I think that goes into what we were just saying with the central communication channel right now being Discord. When a new contributor comes to your Discord, just having found out about that DAO, what are the onboarding steps? Making that clear to that individual how they can become an active contributor. And that goes into the documentation component, making it available and accessible for each individual to be able to really narrow down what they think they could be able to contribute to that community.
Yeah, I think finding these things and then onboarding is definitely a hurdle. But once somebody is actually onboarded and part of the DAO and actively contributing, what are some of the hurdles that they face versus employment by a normal, like an LLC or a standard company? What sort of differences do these contributors have to think about in terms of like what the DAO does well and what it does very differently versus a more traditional organization?
I mean, I think, okay, first, do you guys think that Bitcoin was a DAO? Was it a decentralized autonomous organization? So I think it varies dramatically because the word organization could be 2 people, 10 people, 100 people, could be software only, it could be human only. I think with Bitcoin, it was software, but underneath it all, it's always humans. And so it required people to decide to run this software and to contribute with their computing power. A lot of the DAOs now are starting to get to where there's delegated proof of stake and more sophistication when it comes to what you can do there. But at the end of the day, it's all about humans. And so I think it really matters what humans you're working with and how it's defined. To your point, I think it's about asking for clarity. What is the role? Is it a scope of work? Are we going to be bidding every time for certain tokens? Is there some treasury that's already in place and how's it paying? Or is there a company that's looking to transition that's got current payroll but is looking for solutions to transition to something that's more decentralized?
My own work experience is roughly 15 years doing enterprise-wide leadership development at some of the largest corporations in the US. And the answer to me in this space is always a both and. But particularly when it comes to DAOs, the individual taking initiative is just that much more important, especially when currently right now we're in interim structures. We're not there yet in a lot of what the organization for traditional orgs has the ability to provide their employees, which is a lot of role clarity, a lot of career pathing. And there's some spaces where we want to suspend judgment and not just copy paste what Web2 organizations are doing. But we do need to have organizational clarity of roles and how people can contribute. Clarifying is probably one of the biggest roles a manager, and dare I say we have managers in DAOs, right? Not just community managers, but people who want to take on a leadership role. You're going to be doing 2 different functions all the time. You're going to be clarifying, and that's that management aspect over and over and over until we get more formalized structures. Depending on your DAO, those will look very different. The other role you're going to be doing is going to be around imagination, of helping people see possibilities, because this is such a different space, and helping people to suspend the judgments that they have that we can often default to of copy pasting old ways of doing things.
Yeah, I think hand-holding is something that's heavily debated in the crypto space as to how we can really support an individual, if it's going to be their own journey or if we're going to have a buddy system, which the buddy really guides the individual into where they think that individual could be the best contributor in their life. Also, with community mapping, we need to be able to show clearly who's working in what areas within our DAO space so that people know, okay, this is somebody I can relate to. I'd love to be able to work with them and put themselves in that place there.
Yeah, I think I think that makes a lot of sense. It sounds like we're recreating a lot of the organizational structure that exists in the traditional world, just
But
with DAOs,
meta,
right?
now it's meta.
Very much better.
Well, so why is it better? Let's just dive into that a little bit.
I mean, I think it's the quantification, like you're getting down into the details, number one, but I think the decentralization can't be understated. The removal of needing friction to join comes with its own set of problems. You know, we've got the benefit of it being easy to join, easy to quit, but the rules, every time somebody new contributes to something, and we've all seen how fast things evolve, you've got to now think through simple things like, okay, so somebody's got a great idea, they want to promote something on YouTube. Should that be approved by a group? How big is the group? Is it the full DAO? Probably shouldn't. You know, so it's like rule setting at a very granular detail. The basics are very easy to understand. Okay, I have a vote and I'm a part of something. The specifics is where all the rub comes out. So I don't know that it's necessarily just better. I think there are trade-offs and everything, but the better part with friction removal and cross-border and opt-in, opt-out is clear. And the rest is still, okay, now how do we take the best of what did work and not mess it up? And how do we evolve and see what's next?
Yeah, and that goes into, like, for me, it's about freedom. If you're a contributor in this DAO space, you're not going to just contribute to a singular DAO oftentimes. You're going to be able to contribute to as many DAOs as you think you have time for and that you're really passionate about. So it allows that freedom in being able to collaborate cross-organization and the diversity in ideas that that sort of thing brings.
And I think one of the things that does make it 110% better is this idea that we are forging something new, and so people are entertaining possibilities. That's true even with traditional orgs when they're going through times of deep transformation. One of the biggest benefits in that mucky middle is the ability to suspend judgment about what should be and to actually dream up what's possible and what could be. And that, to me, is entirely where the DAO ecosystem is right now. And that, to me, alone makes it better because it has this state of possible emergence.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think this emergent space is being evolved and refined as we go along. So a lot of these things are an evolving process for sure. So for the actual contributors, though, I mean, I understand the advantages of, you know, it's kind of the meta thesis of gig economy, like contributing to a number of different organizations, but actually receiving my paycheck in crypto a lot of the times, you know, not having the benefits. Let's talk about the advantages and disadvantages from that actual DAO contributor standpoint versus a traditional company.
Yeah, the benefits side of things is something that we need to do a lot better as of DAOs. Right now, one of the few benefit systems that I know of is Opolis, and Opolis provides health insurance, retirement, etc. benefits, but that's not on anywhere level near what traditional corporations provide. And if we start as individual DAOs providing those benefits, that might be an anchor for an individual in that DAO, which we do not want because we want cross-pollination. So we would need to combine efforts and collaboratively make these benefit systems that each individual contributor can become part of.
Yeah, to build on that, TR and I were talking about this because in a weird way, in Web2 organizations, we've created almost these structures of entrapment where you have individuals that say, I need to stay at this employer because I get this specific benefit. And what we want is we want the ability for people to cross-pollinate. We want the ability for people to be at places that they're excited about the purpose and the community, and they're there to truly make an impact. And so when it comes to our benefits, even traditional HR benefits, what we need to be considering is decoupling it so it's not this one-to-one relationship with the employee and the organization. A quick example of this would be you buy a car. You can buy a car from anywhere. You can even have two cars from completely different manufacturers, but you need to fuel that car. You don't go back to the dealership or to that car company to fuel your car. There's a whole nother economy that helps you fuel the car that also has competition, and it's accessible and convenient. And if you buy a Ford, you don't have to fuel up or charge up at some Ford station. you have choice and ability. And when you decouple this, if you have people who join up with an organization but can find their benefits in a way that's personalized to them, it's convenient and it's easy and it covers what they need it to, this allows for free flow and free access and basically keeps our highways of coordination open.
And I can definitely speak to one thing that's been the biggest challenge that I've been up against. We're building software, and that's always hard, but working with traditional structures and thinking in terms of traditional cap tables, we've been building an incentive plan, which is an ESOP or an incentive type structure, which really is just an IOU for something in the future. Now, what tokens are doing really good right now is they're benefiting the immediacy. There's liquidity instant, there's a lot of functionality. However, we haven't really gotten to the bridge, right? So the hardest things are still in the way that the friction exists. And what your point was there is well noted, that it's really like the entire purpose of a stock option plan or investing schedule is to lock people up for a longer period of time. And understanding how long that should be is really hard. So most companies just do something lazy and say, okay, 4 years and over 1 year and we'll do blah, blah, blah. And that doesn't ever work out as well as it should in anybody I've ever spoken to. So thinking in how to innovate there and still have this IOU that's receivable and you're earning another form of compensation that we can all see the potential. It's just we have to still build all the tools, right? And it's hard. So just living with the current system that exists and people that are going to want to do your taxes the exact same way they've been doing forever and want to issue stock the same way they've been doing forever. I think that's the hardest part, is just to be able to kind of bifurcate and see where the innovation's happening and also still know how to plug it in with what's working now today.
Yeah, what I want to add to that is that we need to move benefits beyond just financial benefits. One of the biggest employee engagement aspects is by promoting it via recognition, recognizing that individual for the work that they have put out there, recognizing them as that individual, saying happy birthday when it's their birthday, and really saying you are part of this family here, and we want to be able to support you, not just financially, but through recognizing your own individuality.
Yeah, great points. So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about piggybacking off of like traditional structures. There's a bit of a regulatory uncertainty in terms of like DAO, what it is and what it isn't. And none of us are lawyers, I don't think. I'm not sure. Definitely not legal advice. Seek your own legal advice. All the disclaimers that should be said. But can we touch briefly on how like a contributor should think about regulatory uncertainty within contributing to a DAO and receiving compensation from this organization that may or may not have limited liability protection from the traditional laws that we play with?
I mean, I think the simple answer is you touched on it, like all that long disclaimer language, right? Like, don't do it unless you are willing to have some loss and you're doing it in a way where you're expecting to be playing with something brand new. Don't do it in a way where you're not aware of the risk, right? I don't think any of us have the answer as to how to deal with that. I think it's worth just an example that something that drives me crazy is if we were to all do all of the disclaimers, like every YouTuber, if they had to do the full set of disclaimers before you could watch the video, like we'd all spend the first 5 minutes because they touch on them all, right? But it'd be nice to just be able to click a button and say, hey, I already know that one and never have to hear it again. But that's technology. We have to build better solutions. So what's the right way to do it with the legal reality the way it is? Get good advice and understand that you're not taking too much risk. And I'm not a lawyer.
I would just say this is one of those areas that transparency is so helpful, because I think DAOs are tackling this in very different ways, and how they communicate it is being tackled in very different ways. And so I do not have a legal background, and yet I think I hear people hit the drumbeat over and over, and I think it needs to continue to be beat, that DAOs are new, emerging, it's a risk, and you need to be aligned with the people that you're working with and what options they're exploring, because depending on where they are forming as an LLC or what approaches they're taking, you have different options as a contributor, and you have every right to know what those options are.
I think there's one more thing to add there too, is just, I saw this tweet, I think earlier today, where it kind of highlighted everything we're used to seeing, like shareholder equals token holder or something, like what are all these things? And there is best practice we can all go look at and say, is this transparent? Do we know who I'm working with? Are there ways for us to do the things that the regulation is there for, but do it better, right? Like, what is disclosure for? It's to share information. If there's no information, might be a problem. You might get rugged. To be able to have rights, what are they? What are they defined? You know, so I think there's a lot of obvious stuff that maybe isn't integrated into the current legal system, but that if you're doing it, you're doing the best you can do and probably doing it better. So you just got to look for those things, I think, when you're getting ready to participate, and make sure you feel good about it.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, like, these contributors are coming from an international landscape. So each contributor is going to be subject to different laws based upon their country of origin. So being able to consult with your own legal advice applicable to your location is going to be something that is needed.
Yeah, and I mean, since everybody in here is interested in DAOs, if you're a DAO contributor or one of the main people of your DAO, would highly encourage you to make sure that your legal bases are covered. And like, tell founders all the time, like, if you're not interested in taking any risks, don't do anything in Web 2 or Web 3 rather. But there's some certain things that you need to be careful with because these are real laws that were created in the 1930s and 40s and are being applied to DAOs, which doesn't make sense, but need to make sure. I'd be remiss if I didn't throw that in there, you know? All right, so there's a lot of narratives out there about DAOs and what they are, what they do well. What common narrative do you hear that you disagree with, and why?
It seems like right now most of the people that are coming into the new space are thinking of DAOs as this brand new thing that just showed up with Om forks and Om and time. And that's really frustrating because DAOs have been around, I would say, arguably back to maybe before Bitcoin, but for sure Bitcoin and Ethereum have taken on a life of their own. And I think that's just the wrong narrative, right? Where it's like, oh, DAOs failed. No, I mean, the original DAO hack was pretty illuminating. But that was not the real first DAO. And I think the whole narrative around it is just wrong because it's missing the point that any way we organize can be done in probably more ways than any of us can comprehend. But it's extremely flexible, and that's the point. It's not to be defined so narrowly.
I think for me, it's just, I hear it all the time that DAOs are just smart contracts. They're code. They are smart contracts and code, but they're so much more than that. They're community building mechanisms. They're organizational mechanisms. They're idea sharing, knowledge sharing, wealth generating, just fantastic orgs of the future that are supported by these aspects of code.
As a DAO educator helping a lot of Web 2 people bridge into the Web 3 world, I think one of the biggest things that I hear people say is, oh, so it's basically like a traditional org, but you've got code. And I think one of the biggest things that I disagree with is that you can step into this space without having to learn some of the basics of what makes blockchain revolutionary for how humans exchange today. And I think a lot of people might find it exciting, like the metaverse or like some of these NFTs, and want to step into it with excitement. But you also need to step into it with doing the work to learn why it's revolutionary, because without that, you miss out on capitalizing on the potential of what this actually does that is so different than Web 2 organizations. So I know I'm preaching to the choir here. This is not necessarily the room that needs that message, and yet it's one that we need to consistently be bringing back to the people who enter into this space. You need to dig in and understand why it has potential to be so significantly different.
Nice, great answers. And if you could wave a magic wand or snap your fingers and change one thing within the DAO ecosystem that we operate, what would it be and why? Giving you guys some singers.
Only one?
I think for me, it would be getting it to where every DAO offsets its environmental impact that is generated through the use of energy, use of code, et cetera. Getting that to where we're in a more circular economy and one of more regeneration.
I mean, outside of wanting to change the rules so it's clear that we don't have to be afraid of innovating, I think I would want to just see that treasury management is multi-sig out of the box all the time, every time, no more rug ever, right? Like, let's just be done with that because it's given us all a much steeper hill to climb. We can all put pressure to make sure that we're not allowing for just a bunch of anonymous rugs to happen all the time. Like, multi-sig exists. We've spent forever building this stuff. It works. It changes the game. You can't have it all run away. If we're going to tout all the benefits, we should use them. I mean, I'd definitely like to see that.
I know we're on a journey with DAOs, but I'm pretty impatient. And when I read the report from, I think it was Gitcoin and Bankless, talking about their sample, 80% of them were working in DAOs unpaid. To me, if there's something I could change, it's compensating the amazing talent that's working in the DAO ecosystem right now and having it actually, yes, having it actually be competitive pay. There's brilliant minds here and they're doing phenomenal work. If I could wave a magic wand, it would absolutely be that.
Nice.
Awesome. Great stuff. Guys, that's about all the time we have for today.
One question from the audience.
Yeah, we have time for 1 or 2 questions. I don't know if there's a runner. So I'll just repeat the question for the live stream and stuff. When defining DAOs in the beginning, not much was said about trust and governance, like sufficient decentralization. So like how many signers need to be on the multi-sig to be considered an actual DAO and sufficiently decentralized? Is that essentially the question?
Yeah, I mean, I think just on the trustless governance, for me, it's impossible to define everything in a couple words with the DAO, because you would literally need to write an entire business plan probably to define it all. But I totally agree with you. I think along the lines of multi-sig and trustless governance, and to the previous speaker's point about being able to have this locked down before there's a problem rather than enforcement after there's a problem, it's just a better model. And if we can build things that we know will work better, like it's better to have 3 signatures than 1, it's better to have 5 than 3, and it depends on what the level of value is that we're talking about. If it's just approving something that doesn't affect anything, that's one thing. If it's talking about billions of dollars and ruining everybody's reputation and whatnot, it's another. And so I definitely agree that on the decentralization, you basically have to have some form of that, right? Like, you have to have some ability to say this is trustless governance, because otherwise you lose the ability to opt in. You lose the censorship resistance, and without that, what do we really have, right? You don't really have something that can be that can live on autonomously, for sure, if it can be taken down. So we do have to remember the core principles there, without a doubt, in the definition. Might be out of time.
We can do one more.
Perfect.
Was there a question in there?
No question, but I think a plug for D-Work, which I'm just getting exposed to that through Superhumans. So yeah, we should chat.
Yeah, awesome. One way in the back. You might have to yell.
Yeah, I think is my mic still working? Okay, great. Biggest barriers to compensation. Whew, I bet there's a room full of people who have opinions on what those are. To me, I think some of the fundamentals, I've heard from day one, there's so much money in DAOs, there's so much money in DAOs, and I have yet to see a lot of it. So I think there's something to be said about that there's funding and there's interest, but there's priorities. And that's why I said we're in a bit of an interim structure. A lot of the money is going to developers as we transition a lot of our ideas on chain. And so I think there's something to be said about when you come into the space, depending on what line of work you're doing and how you're contributing, that's going to depend on what your compensation is. And to me, my deepest hope is that that's just a matter of time and an interim structure until we get a lot of these ideas actually up and running.
The only thing I'd add to that is I haven't seen the money either, but I definitely think that it comes down to maybe you've got the solution, a Trello board, I'll come talk to you, but it's like if you're, we need to set up XYZ channels, some minor task inside Discord, for example. So, those are little things, but how do you granularly, like, we got to get to the point where you can do micro payments for micro work and have a clear way to set it up and understand it. And everything's not one size fits all, so you have to kind of have some amount of community-driven governance as you go, or some flexibility in there. But it's just, that's the hardest part I see, is just how to delegate project management in the traditional world where you've got a project manager that drives it, and you either get paid a full check or you don't. We need a better system, or at least I need to know a better system to do that inside a DAO.
Yeah, the other thing I'd share is talentDAO just did a compensation study, primarily with Bankless DAO, and we'll share a little bit more about that at, I think it's this afternoon around 3 right here. And so one of the things that I'd share is it really does matter of who you're looking at and how you plan to reward them, and there are different mechanisms for compensation out there. But so stay tuned for that, and just know that that's something that many DAOs are actively interested in, and talentDAO is actively researching.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Well, thanks so much to our presenters. You guys were great. Make sure to follow them on Twitter, Instagram.